Hello, my friend. Welcome to Humorously Dull History for Sleep. My name is Stephen Dalton, and it is my hope that as I tell you lots of different facts about particular periods in history tonight, you find me so incredibly boring that you fall asleep very quickly, and maybe even with a smile upon your face. It is humorous history after all. Tonight I'll tell you the humorously dull history of television. Yes, television. From the moon landing and royal coronations to spending 45 minutes choosing something to watch on Netflix and then going to bed 5 minutes later. So, just before we get started, allow yourself to settle into this moment. Leave the day that was behind. Feel the support of whatever you lie upon. If your eyes aren't closed yet, allow them to close. Whatever has been, has been. It's history now. Whatever will be, will be. All you have is this moment, and my voice, so allow your curiosity to be a part of this pleasant experience as I tell you the humorously dull history of television. Part 1, in which we turn on the television. Television has come a long way. Today, you can sit down in front of an enormous, high-definition screen containing almost every television program and film ever made, from almost every country on Earth, available instantly at the touch of a button. And there is absolutely nothing to watch. This is one of television's greatest achievements. For decades, humanity complained that there were only 3 channels. So, we fixed it. Now there are thousands of things to watch, spread across 14 different services, and somehow we've recreated the experience of having 3 channels. Except it takes 45 minutes, and we've forgotten the password. You sit down at 8. Tonight, you are going to watch something good. This is important. You don't want rubbish tonight. So, you begin looking. Crime drama? Maybe. Documentary? Not tonight. That series everyone keeps talking about. You should watch that. You don't. Something appears that looks promising. You click on it. You watch the trailer. No. Back. Your partner suggests something. You reject it immediately. Not because it looks bad, because they suggested it too quickly. There has been no process. We have only just begun looking. 20 minutes later, you suggest the same program. Now it has merit. Eventually, you find something. It has 5 seasons. Excellent. Then you discover you're already on episode 3. Neither of you remembers episodes 1 or 2. There is a brief investigation. Did we watch this? I don't know. I remember him. I don't. You were there. Was I? You play the previous episode. 30 seconds in. Oh, yes. Back. By now, it is 9:17. Perhaps we'll just watch something easy. And this enormous black rectangle dominates the room, even when it is switched off. We still arrange furniture around it. Sofa there, chair there, television there. Everybody facing television. Imagine explaining this room to somebody from 1800. This is our sitting room. Lovely. Why are all the chairs pointing at the black rectangle? Well, sometimes it contains Gordon Ramsay. I see. They would not see. And television has changed shape dramatically, while keeping its position of honor. Once it was an enormous wooden box, then an enormous plastic box. Then manufacturers spent decades making it thinner and thinner, until finally television became almost perfectly flat. At which point we started buying larger ones. Humanity will not be cheated out of having an enormous television. If it no longer comes 18 inches into the room, we'll make it 75 inches across. There. Mass restored. And somewhere, in many homes, there is still a remote control. One remote, theoretically shared by everyone. Theoretically. Every household eventually develops a person who becomes the remote's unofficial custodian. They don't announce this position. There has been no election. They simply have it. Ask for the remote, and they will want to know why. What do you want? The remote cannot simply be transferred. Your application requires supporting information, and losing the remote produces an immediate household search. Check the sofa, under the cushion, other cushion, under the person sitting on the sofa. Get up. I'm not sitting on it. Just get up. They get up. Remote there. Nobody apologizes. And television itself has become so ordinary that we forget how completely bizarre the basic idea is. You sit in your home and watch people who are somewhere else. Live, if you like. A football match on another continent. A presidential debate. A royal wedding. A war. A cooking competition. A man attempting to buy a house in Spain, despite clearly disliking every house in Spain. All arrive through the same rectangle. And we've become extremely comfortable talking to it. No, the person on television continues. Don't do that. They do it. Oh, you idiot. They cannot hear you. This has never discouraged anybody. Sports are particularly good for this. A professional athlete who has trained since childhood makes a mistake. A man eating chips on a sofa immediately identifies the technical problem. You've got to hit that first time. Thank God he's here. Somebody should tell the manager. And this strange machine has been with us long enough that entire generations can measure their lives through it. The programs you watched as a child, the television your grandparents had, Saturday mornings, after-school television, the program you were allowed to stay up late for, the program everybody discussed the next morning because everybody had watched it at the same time, the news bulletin that interrupted everything, the sporting event that seemed to stop an entire country, the show your parents loved that seemed impossibly boring. And then, one day, without warning, you become the person saying, "Television used to be better." It happens quickly. So, how did we get here? How did we get from a world in which moving pictures themselves seemed astonishing to one in which somebody can watch television on a telephone while sitting in front of a television? For that, we need to go back, not to Mesopotamia, or ancient Rome, or ancient Egypt, as we often do in these episodes. They can have the evening off. We are going back only to the late 19th century, when scientists and inventors had begun experimenting with a rather extraordinary question. If we can send words through wires, could we somehow send pictures through them too? Part 2, in which television actually starts being television. So, the question I ended the last part with was, if we can send words through wires, could we somehow send pictures through them too? This is the question that begins causing trouble. By the late 19th century, inventors already know that light can be converted into electrical signals. Telegraph networks have transformed communication. Photography exists. Moving pictures are beginning to develop. All the necessary ideas are floating around, waiting for somebody sufficiently determined to combine them into a machine that will eventually allow millions of people to watch other people renovate kitchens. One important early step comes in 1884 from a young German inventor called Paul Nipkow. Nipkow patents a device involving a spinning disc perforated with holes arranged in a spiral. As the disc rotates, those holes can scan an image, one small section at a time. This is the Nipkow disc. We don't need to understand it much more deeply than that. It spins. It has holes. It matters. A surprising amount of technological history can be enjoyed once you accept that you don't personally have to build any of it. And Nipkow himself doesn't suddenly unveil a television. There is no crowd gathered around while he announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, Wheel of Fortune." The technology isn't ready. But the principle of scanning an image becomes important to what will eventually be called mechanical television. For a while, television is going to contain moving parts, actual spinning things, which feels strange now. A modern television can stop working because it needs a software update. An early television might involve a disc physically whizzing around inside it. There is something reassuringly obvious about that. What seems to be wrong with the television? Well, that thing has stopped spinning. Everybody can contribute. The idea attracts experimenters in several countries, and during the early 20th century, people begin trying to transmit moving images. And then we meet John Logie Baird. Baird is Scottish, born in 1888, and he is going to become one of the most famous names in early television. He is also wonderfully unlike the image you might have of a powerful industrial tycoon arriving with an enormous laboratory and 200 engineers. Baird spends periods of his life in poor health and has a series of business ventures before television. One involves socks. Another involves jam. There is something encouraging about this. The man who becomes a television pioneer does not spend his entire life walking directly towards television. For a while, there is jam. History is full of this. We look backwards and someone's life appears beautifully arranged. Born, educated, invents television. No. Actual lives wander about. There are failed ideas. There are strange jobs. There is a period involving socks. Then, in the 1920s, Baird begins experimenting seriously with transmitting moving images. He works with fairly crude equipment, using a mechanical scanning system based around rotating discs. And the first images are tiny, very tiny. We're accustomed to televisions being measured in feet. Baird's early experimental images are measured in inches. Imagine telling somebody today, "Come over, I've got a new television." How big? Well, you hesitate. Do you have a postage stamp? But size isn't really the point. The extraordinary thing is that anything is appearing at all. Baird needs something to put in front of his apparatus while experimenting, and human faces present difficulties. The lights required are extremely bright and hot. So, one of television's earliest stars is a ventriloquist's dummy called Stooky Bill. Stooky Bill has several advantages over a human performer. He can remain perfectly still. He does not complain about the heat. He has no agent. And he is available. This means that before television has news anchors, sitcom stars, talk show hosts, or reality celebrities, it has a ventriloquist's dummy. Television begins as it means to go on, with someone slightly unsettling staring directly at you. In 1925, Baird demonstrates televised moving silhouette images publicly at Selfridges in London. Then, in 1926, he gives a famous demonstration to members of the Royal Institution and a journalist from the Times, showing recognizable moving images of a human face. The pictures are crude. The image has only around 30 scanning lines. 30. Modern high-definition television has more than 1,000 horizontal lines of picture information. But this comparison is unfair to Baird. If you showed a modern viewer a 30-line picture, they would assume something had gone catastrophically wrong. In 1926, people see a face appearing remotely on a screen and realize that's a face. That is enough. That is the thing I love about early technologies. The pioneers receive enormous credit for getting something to happen at all. Later generations become difficult. First telephone call. My God, I can hear your voice. Modern telephone call. Your camera's a bit grainy. Our standards rise remarkably quickly. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, other inventors are working on television too. One of the most important is Philo Farnsworth, an American inventor from Utah. But before we meet him, it's probably worth clearing something up. What are all these people actually trying to do? Because we've jumped rather quickly from moving pictures to people spinning discs in sheds, and it can begin to sound as though several inventors independently woke up and decided that what civilization desperately needed was a very small, unreliable picture of someone's head. The destination is actually much easier to understand if we think about what already exists. By the 1920s, cinema is established. People can go to a movie theater, sit in the dark, and watch moving images on a screen. The Lumiere brothers had famously demonstrated their cinematograph to paying audiences in Paris back in 1895. And other film pioneers were working at roughly the same time. Over the following decades, movies became a major form of entertainment. But film has a limitation. The pictures have already happened. Somebody records them onto physical film. The film has to be developed, then transported, then put into a projector. Then you watch it. Television is chasing something different. Can the picture travel while it is happening? That's the breakthrough we're heading towards. Imagine, if you will, there's a man standing in New York. Could you somehow turn the image of that man into electrical information, send that information somewhere else, and reconstruct his moving image on a screen in another building? That's television. And once you understand that, you can see why inventors are fascinated by it. The telegraph has already allowed words to travel electrically. The telephone has allowed voices to travel electrically. So, there's an obvious, irritating question sitting there. What about pictures? Human beings are very bad at leaving a perfectly good invention alone. We can transmit the human voice. Wonderful. Pause. Can we see him? Oh, for God's sake. And initially, nobody really knows what television will eventually become. They can imagine possibilities. Entertainment, education, news, major public events being witnessed remotely. But they aren't sitting around in 1925 with a detailed plan involving sitcoms, 24-hour news, sports channels, and a program in which 12 attractive people are placed near a swimming pool and encouraged to become emotionally unstable. Television has to discover television. And now back to Philo Farnsworth and why he becomes important. Farnsworth grows up in rural America and becomes fascinated by electrics as a boy. As a teenager, he conceives an idea for scanning pictures electronically in lines. There's a famous story that the inspiration comes while he is looking at the parallel rows of a ploughed field. Back and forth, line after line. Build the picture that way. Which is an astonishing thing to think while looking at a field. Most teenagers looking at a field think, how much longer do I have to be in this field? Farnsworth thinks, television. At 21, in 1927, he and his team successfully transmit an electronic image. And the first image is a line, a straight line. Television's first season is extremely restrained. No characters, no plot, very little character development for the line. But the line appears at the other end. That's what matters. It has been converted into an electrical signal, transmitted and reconstructed as an image. Now, imagine what that means. Something is happening here. Its image appears there. No film has traveled between the two places. You don't wait for anything to be developed. The image itself has traveled as information. That's the conceptual leap that leads directly to us sitting at home watching something happen live, thousands of miles away. And this is where television separates itself from cinema. Cinema says, look what happened. Television can eventually say, look what's happening. That distinction will become enormous. It means the Olympic Games can happen in one country, while millions watch elsewhere. A spacecraft can land on the moon, while people sit in living rooms watching it happen. A news event can unfold, and the world can witness it together and eventually someone can stand outside a courthouse for 6 hours saying, "Nothing further has happened yet." Every technology finds its highest purpose eventually. Farnsworth soon moves beyond the line and successfully transmits recognizable human images. Meanwhile, he isn't the only person pursuing electronic television. Another important figure is Vladimir Zworykin, a Russian-born engineer working in America, eventually for RCA. And now, money enters the room. Television has reached that lovely stage in the life of an invention where scientists have proved something might work, and large companies begin appearing behind them, asking, who owns it? RCA is already a major force in radio. Its powerful leader, David Sarnoff, understands that television could become the next great broadcasting medium, and broadcasting is the crucial idea. One transmitter, huge numbers of receivers. The program goes out. Everybody with the right equipment can receive it. Radio has already created this model. Television essentially looks at radio and says, "Nice, we'll take the audience and add faces." But electronic television and mechanical television are still competing. Baird's system physically scans images using moving components. Farnsworth and Zworykin are pursuing electronic methods that don't depend upon spinning scanning disks in the same way. Electronic television ultimately wins. And that is fortunate, because the television in your living room already contains enough opportunities to malfunction without a large perforated wheel spinning inside it. By the 1930s, television starts moving from experiment towards something recognizably like a service. And this is when an interesting problem appears. Fine, we've invented television. What do we put on it? Nobody knows. This is my favorite stage. Imagine inventing an entire medium and then realizing you've got Tuesday evening to fill. Radio already has music, drama, comedy, news, and variety. Cinema has films. The theater has plays. Television arrives with an empty schedule. So, early broadcasters borrow from everything. There are singers, musicians, short plays, demonstrations, news, variety performances. People simply appearing and doing something in front of a camera because, at this stage, the fact that you can see them somewhere else remains impressive. A man could probably peel a potato. "Look, Edith." "What?" "There's a man peeling a potato." "Where is he?" "New York City." And Edith comes over, because he isn't in the room. That's the program. In Britain, the BBC begins the world's first regular high-definition television service from Alexandra Palace in London in 1936. High definition by the standards of the day, which is an important qualification. Nobody from 2026 should arrive and demand 4K. The early BBC initially trials two competing systems, including Baird's mechanical approach and the electronic Marconi EMI system. Electronic television proves superior and becomes the future, and viewers begin seeing something genuinely new. A performer can be doing something at Alexandra Palace right now, and the viewer can be sitting somewhere else watching it. There is no cinema reel. No recording has been delivered. It is happening. That is the magic trick. And television soon discovers that certain things become particularly powerful when they're live. In 1937, the BBC televises part of the coronation festivities of King George VI. Now, you begin to see where this is going. A major national event is happening in London. You don't necessarily have to be standing there. Television can bring part of it to you. And, over in America, RCA gives television a huge showcase at the 1939 New York World's Fair. President Franklin D. Roosevelt appears on television during events connected with the fair, becoming the first sitting American president to do so. The president is now inside the television. This will eventually become a problem for presidents. Before television, a politician can give a speech and people hear his words. Now everyone can also see that he's sweating. A whole new department of politics is quietly born. Lighting, makeup, where to look, what to do with your face while somebody else is talking. At the end of the 1930s, television is still rare. Sets are expensive. Coverage is limited. Most people don't own one. Nobody yet knows that this strange invention is eventually going to reorganize the furniture. For now, television is still astonishing simply because a picture can leave one place and appear somewhere else almost immediately. And perhaps that's the thing to hold on to. The inventors aren't really trying to create the object we now call a television. They're trying to defeat distance. The telephone lets you hear someone who isn't there. Television says, what if you could see them too? Everything else, the sitcoms, commercials, news anchors, game shows, remote controls, streaming services, reality television, and the 45-minute search for something to watch. That's what we did with the answer. Part 3, in which television moves into the living room. And then, after all the inventing and experimenting and transmitting of lines and faces, television finally does the thing that changes everything. It comes home. By the early 1950s, Particularly in the United States, television ownership is rising at an extraordinary rate. In 1950, only a minority of American households have a television. By the end of the decade, the overwhelming majority do. This isn't merely another household appliance arriving. The refrigerator goes into the kitchen. The washing machine goes wherever someone has found the necessary plumbing. The television walks straight into the main room and says, "Move the chairs." And we do. Before television, the living room might be arranged around a fireplace. Chairs can face one another. This encourages conversation. Television deals with that. Gradually the furniture turns. The family turns. And millions of years of human beings sitting around looking at one another comes to an end because your favorite quiz show is on. This is perhaps television's first great cultural achievement. It gives the entire family something to stare at besides each other. And in America, television ownership becomes a genuine social event. A family gets a set. Neighbors come over. Relatives visit. Children discover that Tommy's parents have television, and suddenly Tommy is a much more interesting child than he was on Monday. Tommy has done nothing. Tommy's father has bought a television. His social standing has improved enormously. There are photographs from this period of families gathered around relatively small screens housed inside enormous cabinets. And the cabinet is worth discussing too. Early televisions often come disguised as serious furniture. Wooden surrounds, doors, polished cabinets. Some look as though the family solicitor might be inside. Manufacturers apparently understand that if you're introducing a mysterious electronic box into a respectable home, it helps if you make it look like a sideboard. The screen itself might be quite small. The furniture around it can be magnificent. 20% television, 80% tree. And the family gathers. Dad has the chair. There is always a chair. Nobody officially assigned him the chair. It is simply understood. Children occupy the floor. Mother may be on the sofa. Someone adjusts the aerial. And for perhaps the first time in history, an entire family begins giving technical instructions to one person standing near a television. That's worse. Go back. No, the other way. There. Don't move. The person holding the aerial has now become part of the broadcasting infrastructure. They may ask, "Can I sit down?" No. The program has started. In Britain, one event gives television an enormous push. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey is televised, and millions watch in Britain, with many people seeing television for the first time in the homes of friends, neighbors, or relatives. Television sets are bought specifically for the occasion. People crowd into rooms. If one household has a television, suddenly that household discovers it has considerably more friends. People who have shown no previous interest in visiting are available on Tuesday. Thought we'd pop in. Lovely. Why have you brought 6 chairs? The coronation demonstrates something television can do better than almost anything before it. It can make an enormous public event feel strangely private. The Queen is being crowned in Westminster Abbey, and you're watching from someone's room. Someone is making tea. A child needs the toilet. Uncle Arthur is blocking the screen. History is occurring behind his head. Arthur. Nothing. Arthur. What? Move. The monarchy has survived for centuries. It has finally encountered Uncle Arthur. And television begins doing this again and again. It takes events that once belonged to the people physically present and puts them into millions of ordinary rooms. In America, the 1950s also become the great age of network television. CBS, NBC, and ABC develop schedules filled with comedy, drama, news, westerns, variety programs, and game shows. And one of the defining programs is I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz become enormous stars, and the program helps establish forms of television comedy that remain familiar decades later. People arrange their evenings around it. That's important, because television doesn't yet come to you whenever you want. You go to television. A program is on Monday at 9. If you want to see it, you need to be there Monday at 9. Television does not care that you are running late. Television has made plans. There is no pause button yet. No recording for most households. No start from beginning. No episode waiting patiently for you tomorrow. You miss it. That's what happened. Someone at work the next morning says, "Did you see?" No. And immediately you have to decide how much information you're willing to risk. Television therefore begins controlling time inside the home. Dinner can move because something is on. Visitors can become inconvenient because something is on. Children can suddenly become extremely cooperative because something is on. Have you done your homework? Yes. The answer has arrived too quickly. Nobody investigates. Program starts in 4 minutes. And family conversation changes. It doesn't disappear, obviously. Families still talk. But now there is another presence in the room, a very demanding presence. Someone begins telling a story. Television becomes interesting. The storyteller notices that they've lost two people. They continue anyway. Then, shush. This is devastating. You are being shushed in your own anecdote because a fictional doctor has entered a room. And advertisements become part of the experience too. American commercial television rapidly becomes an enormously powerful advertising medium. Advertisers can now demonstrate products inside people's homes. Soap, cereal, cars, cigarettes at the time, household products, anything that can be made to appear necessary in 30 seconds. Television advertising discovers an extraordinary principle. You can be perfectly content with your life at 8:14 and discover at 8:15 that your kitchen is inadequate. A woman on television has a better vacuum cleaner. Look at her. She's delighted. Nobody has ever experienced that level of emotional fulfillment while vacuuming. Perhaps it is the vacuum cleaner. Children are even easier. Put a toy on television. Make it look exciting. Add music. Show another child experiencing almost medically concerning levels of happiness. Then wait. Mom? No. But? No. You don't even know what I was going to say. Yes, I do. Television has entered parenting. In Britain, commercial television arrives with ITV in 1955, ending the BBC's television monopoly. Now viewers have a choice. A choice. Two possibilities. This feels luxurious. And immediately, a new household activity develops. What's on the other side? You have to get up to find out. This is important for younger listeners who have only known remote controls. Changing the channel once involved standing. There were people who watched programs they didn't particularly enjoy because the television was 8 feet away. 8 feet. Impossible. If I may, I'll share something about my own life here. As a boy, I inherited a very old television from my grandfather, which ended up sitting at the end of my bed, and I was so resistant to getting up to push the button to change it, I fashioned a snooker cue attached to a bamboo stick in order to push the buttons to change. Such was my reluctance to move a muscle. Anyway, back to the story. Someone eventually says, "Turn it over." Nobody moves. "You turn it over." "I did it last time." There are 4 people in the room, all physically capable. The program continues. This is why the remote control will eventually become one of civilization's most warmly received achievements. Not because changing channels is difficult, because getting up is difficult once you've sat down properly. By the 1960s, television is no longer a novelty. It's becoming part of ordinary life across much of the developed world, while broadcasting is also expanding rapidly across Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere. Japan develops a particularly strong television culture and electronics industry. Television sets increasingly become objects that countries don't merely watch, but manufacture, improve, and export. And television begins creating global moments. In 1960, the first televised US presidential debates between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon show just how much the visual medium can matter in politics. The famous story is that many television viewers think Kennedy performs better, while some radio listeners judge Nixon more favorably, although the neatness of that comparison has been debated by historians. But the larger point stands. A politician now has to look presidential. And then television begins going somewhere even more extraordinary. Space. During the 1960s, the space race unfolds partly through television. Rockets launch. Astronauts become household names. Families watch events that would have been almost incomprehensible a generation earlier. And then, in July 1969, Apollo 11 lands on the moon. Neil Armstrong steps onto the lunar surface, and hundreds of millions of people around the world watch. Think about the distance we've travelled since Baird's tiny experimental faces. Within roughly 4 decades, television has gone from, "Look, I can just about see that man's face," to, "That's a man on the moon." And the remarkable thing is where people watch it. At home, in living rooms, in bars, in public spaces. People gather around televisions late at night or at unusual hours, depending on where they are in the world. The moon is happening. Someone is still making coffee. Imagine being a child then. Your grandparents grew up in a world before widespread cars, aircraft, and radio. You are sitting beside them, watching a human being walk on another world. Grandad has probably spent years telling you that television will rot your brain. Tonight, Grandad is quiet. And television creates a new kind of memory. People begin remembering where they were when they watched something. Not where the event happened, where they were when television brought it to them. A coronation, an assassination, a moon landing, a championship game, a famous finale. The television becomes a strange little memory machine sitting in the corner of the room. And by the 1970s, it has become even more central to everyday culture. Color television spreads. This happens at different speeds in different countries. In the United States, color broadcasting develops through the 1950s and becomes increasingly common during the 1960s. Britain begins regular color television broadcasts in the late 1960s. And color television creates a new problem. Your old television still works, but now it works incorrectly, apparently. Yesterday, black and white television was television. Today, somebody down the road has color. This is intolerable. You visit, they turn it on. Color. Very nice. You say this as casually as you can. You go home. Your television looks like it has died. Nothing has actually changed. You have simply seen the neighbor's television. This principle will drive consumer electronics for the rest of time. And color television is expensive enough that for many families it remains an aspiration. Eventually, it arrives. The family gathers. Someone turns it on. And for several days, people become unusually interested in programs involving brightly colored objects. Nature programs benefit enormously. Sports benefit. Entertainment shows benefit. The news benefits less. Nobody needed to discover the exact color of the newsreader's tie, but now we know. The 1960s and 70s also produce programs that become cultural landmarks. In America, there are shows such as the Andy Griffith Show, Star Trek, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, All in the Family, MASH, and Saturday Night Live towards the middle of the 1970s. Britain produces Doctor Who, The Avengers, Dad's Army, Fawlty Towers, and Monty Python's Flying Circus, among many others. And television begins developing national personalities. American television doesn't feel exactly like British television. British television doesn't feel exactly like Japanese television. Japanese television doesn't feel exactly like Irish television. Different countries develop their own news styles, comedies, children's programs, game shows, and stars. But certain television behaviors become universal. Everyone has a program they refuse to miss. Everyone has a program they claim not to like, but somehow know a surprising amount about. And every family has experienced somebody entering the room halfway through something and asking, "Who's that?" Nobody answers. What happened? Just watch it. Is he her husband? For God's sake. Television has brought families together. Nobody promised they would be happy about it. And by the 1970s, the television set has completed perhaps its most remarkable transformation. It is no longer miraculous. Nobody gathers the neighbors because there's a television in the house. The children have always known it. It comes on in the morning. It comes on after school. It comes on in the evening. News arrives through it. Comedy arrives through it. Presidents arrive through it. The moon arrives through it. And sometimes absolutely nothing important is happening. The television is simply on. Nobody is even really watching. Someone is reading. Someone is doing something else. Someone gets up and leaves the room. The television continues talking to an empty chair. And that may be the moment television truly conquers the home. When humanity takes one of the most extraordinary inventions in its history, a machine capable of showing us events occurring across the planet almost as they happen, and leaves it on in the background while looking for the scissors. Part 4, in which television gets more television. By the beginning of the 1980s, television has won. It is in the house. It has the best position in the living room. The family knows where to sit. Dinner has learned to negotiate with it. Children understand that certain programs are theirs, certain programs belong to their parents, and the news belongs to everybody, while apparently being enjoyed by nobody under 12. Television could probably have stopped there. It doesn't. Because during the 1980s, television begins multiplying. For decades, viewers in many countries have lived with a relatively small number of channels. In the United States, the three big commercial networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, dominate television viewing for years. Britain has the BBC and ITV, with BBC Two joining them in the 1960s. There is choice, but it is a manageable choice. You can inspect the possibilities without losing the will to live. And television schedules matter enormously. People buy newspapers and television guides partly to find out what's on. You actually plan television. You might look through the listings in the morning and think, oh, that's on tonight. And then remember, all day. No television has reminded you. No notification appears. You are carrying this information yourself. At 8:57, someone looks at the clock. Oh, it's on. And people move. There is urgency. Somebody is still making tea. It's starting. I know. The tea has become involved in a race against broadcasting. The cable television begins expanding dramatically in the United States. Cable itself is older, but during the late 1970s and especially the 1980s, it starts transforming what American viewers can receive. More channels arrive. Specialist channels arrive. television begins dividing itself according to what you actually want to watch. Sport? There can be a channel for that. News? There's a channel. Music? A channel. Children's TV? There's a channel. This seems like paradise, because everyone has experienced sitting through a program they don't particularly want to watch because something better might be on afterwards. Now television is promising. What if there were more television? Humanity considers this carefully. Yes, we'll have that. One of the most important new arrivals is CNN, launched in 1980 by Ted Turner, a television channel devoted to news 24 hours a day. 24. This is initially a startling idea. The normal arrangement has been that news happens throughout the day, and then at a particular time, a person sits behind a desk and tells you which bits were important. CNN says, no, we will remain here forever. This creates an immediate practical difficulty. There isn't always enough major news to fill 24 hours. The world can be inconsiderately quiet. But the channel remains. Someone is at the desk. Something must be said. Eventually, television news becomes extraordinarily good at turning, we don't know yet, into several hours of television. A reporter stands outside a building. Nothing is happening outside the building. This is why the reporter is outside it. Back in the studio? Anything new? No. Thank you. We'll return to Sarah shortly. Sarah remains outside. The building continues. And then, in 1981, another channel arrives in America. MTV. Music Television. The first video shown is, famously, Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. A little smug, perhaps. Radio has welcomed television's new music channel into the world, and television immediately plays a song announcing radio's death. No flowers. MTV changes popular culture enormously. Music videos already exist, of course, but now there is a major American channel built around showing them. And suddenly, musicians don't merely need to sound interesting. They need to look interesting for 3.5 minutes. This is excellent news for some musicians, more complicated news for others. The 1980s music video becomes an art form of its own. Smoke, leather, wind machines, motorcycles, empty warehouses, someone staring meaningfully into the middle distance. A woman turns around in slow motion. Why? Nobody knows. The guitar solo has begun. There is weather indoors. Pop music becomes intensely visual, and stars such as Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Prince understand the possibilities brilliantly. Michael Jackson's Thriller video in 1983 is closer to a short film than a simple performance clip. It becomes a television event, and television is increasingly very good at events. Something happens and enormous numbers of people watch together. In 1981, hundreds of millions around the world watched the wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer. In 1985, Live Aid links huge concerts at Wembley Stadium in London and John F. Kennedy Stadium in Philadelphia, broadcasting performance internationally to raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia. Television is now capable of creating an audience of astonishing size. Different countries, different time zones, millions upon millions of people seeing the same thing. And this creates one of the great lost experiences of older television. The next morning, you go to school, you go to work, and everyone has seen it. You don't need to establish which episode. There was only one. You don't have to say, "Where are you up to?" Everybody is up to now. This makes conversation extremely efficient. Did you see it? Yes. Done. Today, recommending a television program can require administrative negotiations. You should watch it. What is it on? I think it's on Hulu. We don't have Hulu. It might be on Disney Plus where you are. Is that the one we cancelled? No, we cancelled Max. Thought we still had Max. No, that was through something else. By the time you've located the program, nobody cares what happens in it. In the 1980s, television also becomes gloriously excessive. American prime-time soap operas, such as Dallas and Dynasty, or Dynasty, depending where you're from, turn wealth, betrayal, business, and family warfare into enormous international entertainment. Dallas produces one of television's most famous questions. Who shot J.R.? The mystery becomes a cultural phenomenon. Millions want to know. People discuss suspects. Newspapers cover it. The eventual episode revealing the answer attracts a gigantic American audience. This is television behaving almost like a national campfire, except the story involves an oil tycoon everybody wants to shoot. Dynasty, meanwhile, gives viewers wealth on an almost medicinal scale. Mansions, jewelry, shoulder pads capable of influencing doorways. People don't merely enter rooms, they arrive. Nobody on Dynasty appears to own clothing suitable for quietly popping out for milk. British television is producing its own enormous hits. Only Fools and Horses begins in 1981. Blackadder arrives in 1983. There is Yes Minister, and later Yes Prime Minister. EastEnders begins in 1985, joining Coronation Street, which has already been running since 1960. And soap operas become a peculiar form of long-term relationship. You don't necessarily watch every episode. You can leave. Years pass. Then one evening you happen to see it again. Somebody you recognize is still there. Good. Someone else is now married to someone unexpected. There is a child who appears to have aged 14 years since Tuesday. You need information. What's happened to Susan? Oh, she left. When? 1987. Right. You have missed a little. Game shows are everywhere too. And game shows give television one of its purest pleasures. Watching a stranger fail to know something that you know. This feels fantastic. You're sitting at home, no studio lights, no audience, no money at stake, possibly holding a sandwich. The contestant hesitates. You know it. You absolutely know it. Paris. They say Rome. You idiot. For perhaps 4 seconds you are intellectually superior to a person you've never met. Then the next question comes. You have no idea. Quiet again. The 1980s also bring an increasingly important object into the home. We've mentioned it earlier, but it's worth mentioning again. The remote control. Remote controls existed much earlier, but during the 1980s, they become increasingly common as electronic television sets and cable systems spread. And this changes family power. Previously, the person nearest the television has responsibilities. They may be a child. This is one of the traditional functions of children. Turn it over. The child gets up. Click. No, the other one. Click. Go back. Click. The child returns to the floor. 2 minutes later, turn it down a bit. Childhood has many hardships that don't appear in history books. The remote control ends this. Now the channels can be changed from the sofa. This should democratize television. It does not. It creates the person with the remote. The remote becomes a tiny scepter. Whoever holds it has power. And some people cannot simply watch one program once they have a remote. They must check. What else is on? Click. Click. Go back. I am. You've gone past it. I know. Click. There. What was that? What? Go back. We have invented a device specifically to avoid walking 6 feet and immediately used the saved energy to become restless. Then comes channel surfing, an extraordinary behavior. You are not watching anything. You are watching everything for 2 seconds. News, baseball, advertisement, movie, weather, cartoon. man selling exercise equipment, news again. Your thumb is watching television. Nobody else is. And television sets themselves keep changing. Color is now increasingly normal. Screens grow. Electronics improve. Japanese companies such as Sony, Panasonic, Toshiba, and Sharp become major forces in the global television market. The old wooden cabinet gradually gives way to plastic. Televisions become more obviously technological objects, although they remain enormously deep. A large cathode ray tube television is a magnificent piece of furniture. The screen may be 27 inches across. Behind it is approximately the rest of the television. Moving one requires planning. You don't casually decide, I think the television would look better over there. Do you? Because now we're finding another person. Bend your knees. Ready? No. Put it down. This thing is staying here until 1997. And by the end of the 1980s, television has become something earlier pioneers could hardly have imagined. It isn't simply transmitting pictures over a distance anymore. It's creating celebrities, selling products, influencing elections, carrying global news, broadcasting concerts across continents, giving millions of people the same jokes and the same cliffhangers, and filling enormous amounts of completely ordinary time. Saturday afternoon, Tuesday evening, Sunday morning, sick day from school. That last one has a special television. Daytime television, when you're normally at school, feels like you've entered a forbidden parallel society. Who are these people? Why is this program on? Does television do this every day while we're gone? There are presenters you've never seen. Advertisements for things apparently intended for adults with back problems. A quiz show at 11 in the morning. You realize television has an entire life without you. And perhaps that's where the 1980s leave us. Television has gone from a miraculous machine that people gathered around simply because it could produce a moving picture to something so completely embedded in everyday life that we barely notice how much time we're spending with it. And now there are more channels, more programs, more choice, more reasons to stay on the sofa. Which brings us to the 1990s. The decade when television will give us even more choice, and somehow still arrange for almost everybody to be watching the same thing. Part 5, in which everybody is watching Friends. By the 1990s, television has reached a rather magnificent stage in its development. There are now more channels than ever before. Cable and satellite are expanding. The remote control is established. VHS recorders have given viewers at least some power over the schedule. And despite all this new choice, enormous numbers of people still end up watching the same programs. This is the great contradiction of 1990s television. There is more television. But on Thursday night in America, quite a lot of people are watching Friends. Before we get there, though, the decade inherits one of television's finest creations from the years before it, the shopping channel. Home shopping television had taken off in America during the 1980s, particularly with networks such as HSN and QVC, and by the 1990s, it has become an established part of the television landscape. The idea is beautifully simple. Previously, television showed you advertisements between programs. Now, the advertisement is the program. Problem solved. A presenter stands beside a necklace. For 20 minutes, there is a necklace, there is a price, and somehow there is still more to say. Look at the detailing. We are looking. Absolutely beautiful. Yes. And remember, this is available today. We know. We've been together for 17 minutes. Shopping television discovers that almost any object can become exciting if you place it on a slowly rotating platform and tell people there are only 47 remaining. A saucepan becomes urgent. You weren't thinking about saucepans. You were barely awake. It's 1:20 in the morning. Now there are only 32. What are other people doing? Why is everybody buying this saucepan? You begin to feel left behind. The presenter produces another saucepan. It fits inside the first saucepan. Oh, come on. Where's the telephone? And there are demonstrations. This is where shopping television becomes genuinely dangerous. A normal kitchen knife cuts a tomato badly. Pathetic. Then the special knife arrives. One movement. Perfect tomato. Or tomato. The presenter cuts another. Then a shoe. Then possibly a small piece of timber. You don't remember needing a knife capable of cutting a shoe, but it would be foolish to rule it out. The 1990s are full of television like this, because television is no longer confined to the evening. It is always there, and daytime television develops its own peculiar atmosphere. Turn on the television in the middle of a weekday, and you enter another world. In America, Oprah Winfrey is already a phenomenon. The Oprah Winfrey Show, nationally syndicated from 1986, becomes one of the defining talk shows in television history. Oprah interviews celebrities, authors, and ordinary people. There are serious subjects, emotional stories, self-improvement, relationships, books, enormous surprises, and Oprah herself becomes one of the most famous people on television. Then there are shows such as Ricki Lake, and at a rather different temperature, the Jerry Springer Show. Daytime television gradually discovers that if two people have a disagreement, there are several possible responses. They could discuss it privately. They could seek counseling. Or we could put both of them on television in front of an audience. Jerry Springer chooses door 3. The basic experience of turning on certain 1990s talk shows halfway through is extraordinary. You know nothing. A woman is shouting. A man called Darren is attempting to explain himself. The audience already hates Darren. You have been watching for 11 seconds. You also don't trust Darren. Something has happened involving the woman's sister. Darren stands up. Audience. Ooh. You don't know why. You remain. This is important. You were going to make lunch. Lunch can wait. Darren has made another poor decision. And talk television becomes very good at making private problems public. For most of human history, if your neighbor's marriage is collapsing, you might hear about it over a fence. Now a marriage can collapse at 2 p.m. in front of several million people. Progress takes many forms. But the real crown jewels of American television around this period are the sitcoms. And the 1990s inherit an extraordinary tradition. Cheers has been running since 1982, a sitcom set largely in a Boston bar, which is television economy at its finest. You don't need to invent a reason for everybody to meet every week. They drink there. Done. Cheers ends in 1993, and its character, Frasier Crane, walks straight into another program. Frasier begins that same year. Now we're in Seattle. Frasier has a radio psychiatry show. His brother Niles is even more particular than he is. Their father Martin moves in with Frasier, bringing his dog Eddie and a battered recliner into Frasier's carefully designed apartment. The chair is one of the great sitcom ideas because you understand the entire conflict instantly. Frasier has spent a great deal of money creating a beautiful home. His father has brought his chair. Every family knows this object. It may not be a chair. It may be a mug, a blanket, an ancient pan. Then there is Seinfeld, beginning in 1989 and becoming enormous during the 1990s. Seinfeld builds episodes around the tiny irritations and absurdities of ordinary life. Waiting for a table, renting a car, standing in line, parking, social obligations, people being annoying. And Seinfeld understands something television comedy becomes exceptionally good at. Sometimes the funniest thing that happened to you today was nothing. You went to collect something. There was a problem. A person was strange. You came home furious. What's wrong? You wouldn't believe it. Then you spend 12 minutes explaining a conversation at a dry cleaner. This is human storytelling in its natural habitat. And then, In September 1994, 6 people sit in a coffee shop in New York. Friends begins. Rachel, Ross, Monica, Chandler, Joey, Phoebe. And television acquires one of the defining programs of the decade. The premise is almost aggressively simple. 6 friends in their 20s and 30s live in New York, spend enormous amounts of time together, date people, work, fall in love, break up, and sit in a coffee shop. That's largely it. There is no spaceship, nothing epic. Joey wants a sandwich, and people become enormously invested. Ross and Rachel become one of television's great ongoing romantic questions. Will they? Won't they? They will. Then they won't. Then they might. Then something has happened. Then we were on a break. A sentence enters popular culture and refuses to leave. And this is what enormous television shows could do particularly well in the 1990s. They gave people common references. A line appears on Thursday night. By Friday morning, people are repeating it. No clip needs to go viral. Nobody sends you a link. You watched it. So did they. The schedule keeps everyone together. The episode happens. Then everybody talks about it. You cannot binge the whole season ahead of your friends. You cannot casually say, "Oh, are you only on episode 3? There is no episode 4 yet. We are all on episode 3. Calm down." And television becomes part of the weekly rhythm. Thursday has programs. Sunday has programs. Certain shows mean bedtime. Certain shows mean the weekend. Television has become a clock. And it is Thursday night. Friends is on. And if the phone rings, somebody else can get it. Part 6, in which television stops waiting for you. By the end of the 1990s, television has spent roughly half a century training us very successfully. The program is on at 9. You will be there at 9. If somebody telephones at 8:58, they have made a serious error of judgment. But gradually, this arrangement begins to collapse. DVDs arrive and quickly become popular. Compared with VHS, they seem wonderfully sophisticated. No rewinding. This alone feels futuristic. For years, finishing a film has been followed by the mildly irritating responsibility of returning the entire film to the beginning. Video rental stores even put stickers on tapes. Be kind, rewind, which is a strangely emotional way of asking someone to operate a machine for 3 minutes. DVDs also bring menus, special features, deleted scenes, commentaries, behind-the-scenes documentaries, and for a brief period, humanity becomes extremely excited about all of this. You finish a film, Would you like to watch 17 minutes about how they made the costumes? Apparently, yes. It's midnight. Let's hear from the costume supervisor. Then television series begin appearing as DVD box sets, and something changes. Previously, if you'd missed season 2 of a program, that was largely your problem. Now somebody can hand you an entire season in a box. You have to watch this, and you accept it, which creates another responsibility, because they will ask, have you started it yet? Not yet. A week later, have you started it? No. Eventually their recommendation is sitting on your shelf, accusing you. Then comes TiVo, launched in the United States in 1999, and other digital video recorders. This is much more serious. The machine can record programs digitally. You can pause live television. Pause it. The first time somebody sees this, it feels slightly improper. A live program is happening. You press pause. The person freezes. You go and make tea. The entire broadcast apparently waits for you. For decades, television has controlled the household. Now the household has found the pause button. Revenge. And soon we can skip through advertisements. Advertisers have spent 50 years carefully placing themselves between us and the thing we actually want to watch. Now, fast forward. Cars, cereal, insurance, toothpaste, gone. The viewer has become dangerous. Meanwhile, television itself is changing. In 1999, HBO launches The Sopranos, and the idea of what a television drama can be begins shifting dramatically. Over the following years, programs such as The Wire, 6 Feet Under, Lost, Mad Men, and eventually Breaking Bad contribute to an extraordinary period of ambitious television drama. Actors who once might have regarded television as somewhere you went between films increasingly don't. Television is becoming prestigious, serious, cinematic. People begin saying, it's not really television. It is. It's on a television. We've simply become embarrassed by how good it is. And then, at exactly the same time that television is becoming extremely sophisticated, another enormous genre says, what if we just put ordinary people in a house and see what happens? Reality television. Big Brother spreads internationally after beginning in the Netherlands in 1999. Survivor becomes enormous in America in 2000. Then come American Idol and countless talent competitions, dating programs, makeover shows, and variations on the basic idea of putting human beings somewhere and waiting for them to become annoyed. Reality television discovers that professional writers are optional if you select the right people. Put 12 strangers together. Remove privacy. Add cameras. Wait. Someone will eventually say, I didn't come here to make friends. This person has come to a program containing 11 other people. Their intentions remain unclear. Talent shows bring another pleasure. Auditions. Someone walks confidently onto a stage. Their family has told them they have a beautiful singing voice. Their family has lied. The judges know within 4 seconds. The audience knows within 2. The singer does not know at all. This is difficult. And then there is the reality TV interview. Something happens. 2 people argue. Immediately afterwards, one of them sits alone in another room and explains the argument we have just watched. I just felt like she was being disrespectful. We know. We were there. Television has begun providing witnesses with their own witness statements. And reality television becomes enormous because it's cheap to produce compared with many scripted programs, endlessly adaptable, and very good at creating conversation. Once again, people go to work the next morning saying, "Did you see it?" But that sentence is already beginning to change, because viewers aren't necessarily watching at the same time anymore. One person recorded it. Another has the DVD. Someone is 3 episodes behind. So now comes the dangerous question. Where are you up to? This requires care. Season 3. Which episode? The one where don't say any more. Nobody has said anything yet. Still, dangerous. The spoiler becomes a serious social offense. You can ruin 20 hours of somebody's life with 7 words. And by the end of the 2000s, another screen has quietly entered the room. The computer. YouTube launches in 2005. Broadcasters begin putting more content online. Internet speeds improve. Netflix, which began in America as a DVD by mail business, starts offering streaming in 2007. At first, this doesn't necessarily feel like the end of traditional television. It's simply another way of watching things. The television set remains in its position. The sofa still faces it. The remote still disappears. Everything seems secure. But television has just made a terrible strategic mistake. It has escaped onto the internet. And once television no longer needs the television, things are about to get very strange. Part 7, in which television escapes the television. And this brings us more or less to where we began this evening. Television has escaped. Netflix begins streaming in the United States in 2007, and over the following years, the old relationship between viewer and schedule starts falling apart completely. For most of television history, the program has told you when to arrive. Thursday, 9 o'clock. Be there. Streaming says, whenever. This seems magnificent. And it is. But human beings are very good at turning convenience into a new problem. Because now, an entire series can arrive at once. You intend to watch one episode. At the end, another begins automatically. This is significant. Previously, continuing required a decision. Now, stopping requires a decision. The television has learned something about us. Episode 2 finishes. You should go to bed. Episode 3 begins in 7 seconds. 7, 6, 5. Apparently we're watching episode 3. And soon we have binge watching. An activity that sounds slightly alarming because it often is. Someone asks what you did over the weekend. I watched Breaking Bad. How much? There is a pause. Seasons 1 through 4. And television is no longer even confined to the television. You can watch it on a laptop, a tablet, a phone, on a train, in bed, at an airport. Someone can now watch a beautifully photographed, enormously expensive drama made by hundreds of people on a 6-inch screen while eating a sandwich. This was probably not what Philo Farnsworth imagined while looking at that field. Then every company notices streaming. Netflix has subscribers. Excellent. Everyone would also like subscribers. More services arrive. And suddenly the wonderful future in which everything is available becomes surprisingly similar to the past. That show looks good. What is it on? I don't know. We've got Netflix. It's not on Netflix. Prime? No. Disney? No. What about the other one? Which other one? Nobody knows. At some point, someone says, "Do we still pay for Apple TV?" And everybody goes quiet. Possibly. Television has also become extremely clever. It now recommends things. Because you watched this, you might like this. Sometimes it is disturbingly accurate. Other times you watch one documentary about sharks, and the television apparently decides, Stephen is a shark man now. Here are 17 more. Your personality has been updated. And yet, the biggest change may be what we've lost. For decades, television created enormous shared moments because there was no other way to watch. The coronation, the moon landing, the finale of MASH, Who Shot JR, huge sporting events, the final episode of Friends. Millions of people arriving at exactly the same moment. We still have some of that, especially with sport, major news, and certain programs. But television has become much more personal. You watch your thing. I watch mine. We'll both promise to watch the thing we said we'd watch together. One of us will secretly watch the next episode, then pretend not to know what happens. Badly. And perhaps that's the funny thing about the entire history of television. The technology has changed almost beyond recognition. Baird struggled to transmit a tiny moving face. Farnsworth transmitted a line. Families gathered around little screens, in enormous wooden cabinets. Then came color, cable, remote controls, VHS, DVDs, reality television, streaming, smart TVs, screens thin enough to hang on walls. And after nearly a century of improvements, we've arrived at the most technologically advanced television experience in history. We sit down, pick up the remote, and say, "What's on?" Some things apparently cannot be improved. But television was never really just the box. It's the room around it. It's sitting on the floor as a child because the adults have all the chairs. It's being allowed to stay up because something special is on. It's the program your mother always watched, the show your father insisted he wasn't asleep through. It's Saturday morning, a familiar theme tune, a news event you can still remember watching, a terrible program you somehow miss because the person you watched it with isn't there anymore. Televisions come and go. The enormous wooden one disappears, then the heavy plastic one. Then the flat screen replaces that. The programs disappear too. But strangely, some little piece of the room remains. And perhaps that's why television has mattered quite so much. For all its extraordinary technology, it spent most of its history doing something very simple. It gave us somewhere to sit together, even if nobody was talking.